Sea of Japan, March 21st, 1984. At 150 feet beneath the surface, darkness becomes absolute. No horizon exists here. No moonlight penetrates these depths. No sense of direction remains. Only depth gauges, watch rotations, and air carrying the metallic bite of ozone mixed with warm machine oil. Inside the Soviet nuclear attack submarine, K-314, the crew lives by instruments and sound. Not because sound brings comfort, but because sound means survival. Captain Vladimir Evsenko stands motionless in the control room, a man being evaluated by forces beyond his control. His vessel, a Project 671, designated Victor class by NATO, was built to hunt. Fast, deadly, rugged. A predator wrapped in steel. Tonight, it feels like prey. Somewhere above them lurks the USS Kitty Hawk, a conventionally powered American supercarrier. 80,000 tons of floating runway, fuel tanks, and aircraft. The centerpiece of a carrier battle group conducting a major exercise with South Korea called Team Spirit. The political message rings loud, even as the ships attempt silence. A carrier doesn't merely project power, it commands the world's attention wherever it goes. Soviet headquarters wants more than attention. They demand data. The kind of intelligence photographs and speeches cannot provide. Propeller counts, acoustic signatures, the subtle sonic fingerprints that allow you to recognize a ship in darkness the way you recognize a face in a crowd. So K-314 stalks its prey. For days, the pursuit has demanded brutal patience, following distant machinery noise through frigid water, threading between thermal layers where temperature bends sound into deception. Earlier in the week, contact was solid. The carrier group was there. Escorts, turbines, the steady mechanical rhythm signaling organized force. Then, the ocean went quiet. Not quiet in any peaceful sense. Quiet like a room where someone has stopped breathing. The Americans tightened emissions control. Radars minimized, radio chatter reduced. The surface picture deliberately obscured. For a submarine crew relying on their ears, this is the cruelest trick. You cannot determine if the enemy is far away or close enough to touch. In the sonar room, headphones press into skulls. A pencil hovers above a log sheet, waiting to record a bearing that refuses to come. Operators sift through background noise, the hiss of sea state, the crackle of biological life, distant merchant traffic, desperately seeking man-made rhythm hiding behind the ocean's static. Nothing. No escorts, no carrier, no thick band of sound growing larger like an approaching storm. This raises a question no captain wants to voice aloud. If you cannot hear the screen, how do you avoid the blades? Evsenko knows the doctrine governing both sides. If the Americans detect a Soviet boat probing their defenses, they can respond aggressively without firing a shot. Active sonar pings, pattern searches, simulated attacks designed to drive the intruder away and demonstrate who controls these waters. But tonight, there are no pings. Only absence. Absence is never neutral. Absence is information. It suggests intention. That's why the decision comes like a cold, simple sentence. Periscope depth. Risky, necessary. If the deep has transformed into an acoustic mirage, you go where physics changes. Near the surface, you can raise antennas, catch a radar burst, take a quick look, reacquire the target before it vanishes and becomes a career-ending gap in your after-action report. Ballast tanks hiss. The deck angle shifts. Loose objects creak in their restraints as the submarine begins its slow ascent. Blind, controlled, professional. No heroics, just procedure. At 100 feet, 80. The air in the control room feels heavier, as if the boat is climbing into mounting expectation. Normally, as you rise, the acoustic picture should expand. You should hear surface activity bleeding downward. Instead, the ocean seems to swallow sound. A dampening effect, a heavy blanket laid across the water above them. The sea is layered tonight. Sharp gradients, converging currents, temperature boundaries that bend sound upward and outward, creating shadow zones, places where something can exist yet remain unheard. Submariners understand this theoretically. Theory doesn't prevent your skin from crawling when instruments insist the world is empty. Evsenko takes position at the periscope stand. His hands settle on the grips. The next moment should be routine. Raise the optics, scan the horizon, correct course, drop back into the safety of depth. The depth gauge touches periscope depth. And the record of that night fractures. No warning ping, no shouted bearing, no clean cinematic buildup. Just sudden, violent collision that transforms the submarine into a shaken instrument. Metal screams against metal. The sound isn't an explosion. It's worse in a different way. Continuous, grinding, impossible to ignore. The entire hull shudders as if struck by something weighing as much as a city. Men collapse. A pipe joint screams. High-pressure air hisses through a ruptured line like an enraged animal. Lights die. Then, emergency red floods the space, painting faces into sharp, terrified geometry. For one heartbeat, the most rational conclusion is the most dangerous. Torpedo. Then, a second sensation arrives, rhythmic, heavy, immediate. A chopping thud that doesn't belong to a weapon, it belongs to machinery, massive machinery, directly overhead. Thud, 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 a propeller. Not a torpedo propeller, not a small ship, something immense. The submarine is forced downward as if pressed by a giant hand. The hull groans under a load it was never designed to accept from above. For several seconds, K314 scrapes along the underside of something that should have been impossible to miss, something that should have been deafening on sonar. Then the pressure releases. The boat tumbles into turbulent wake. Engineers report the words nobody wants to hear. Propulsion is gone. The screw has stopped. The submarine is alive, but it cannot move as designed. Evsenko's mind does what trained minds do in crisis. It stops asking why and starts asking what now. Damage control, hull integrity, reactor status, ballast, radiation checks. The checklist becomes a lifeline, but one question won't leave the room. What hit us? Because the answer isn't merely tactical, it's political. If this was an American carrier, and the odds narrow by the second, then surfacing means humiliation and exposure. Staying submerged without propulsion presents a different risk, a steel coffin drifting in hostile waters. The order comes anyway. Emergency surface. Compressed air roars. The submarine rises like a wounded animal forced into daylight. The hatch opens. Cold night air knifes inward, carrying salt and diesel and the faint tang of exhaust on the wind. Evsenko climbs to the bridge and lifts binoculars into darkness. He expects empty water. He expects, at worst, a merchant vessel. Instead, 2,000 yards away, stern lights trace the silhouette of a flat-topped fortress turning through Black Sea, an aircraft carrier, Kitty Hawk. The target didn't flee. K314 surfaced beneath it, and as the carrier continues its turn, wake boiling, escorts beginning to shift in the distance, the most terrifying possibility isn't that the Americans are angry. It's that they may not even know what they hit. Or worse, they do. And the ocean that concealed them once might hide what happens next. The carrier's stern lights recede like a moving skyline, and for a moment, Evsenko's brain refuses to process what his eyes report. An aircraft carrier isn't supposed to appear like this. Sudden, close, indifferent, like a building that decided to turn in darkness. Behind him on the sail, wind snaps at clothing and throws spray into faces. Below, the crippled submarine rolls in the carrier's wake with the uneasy motion of something wounded that cannot choose its direction. The ocean is louder up here, slap of waves, distant engines, the low cough of ship exhaust carried across water. Yet the loudest sound exists inside his head. We were underneath it. Somewhere down in the control room, red battle lighting paints metal into harsh angles. Men move quickly but carefully, because panic at sea doesn't manifest as screaming. It looks like hands shaking over valves. It looks like someone forgetting a procedure they've performed 1,000 times. It looks like a junior officer gripping a railing too tightly, knuckles white under red light, as if the steel might float away without him. Reports arrive in clipped phrases. Hull integrity, holding, reactor, stable. Propulsion, lost. Steering, degraded. The boat is alive, but it's no longer a weapon. It's an object, and objects get collected. The radio operator calls up from below, voice tight with disbelief. They're intercepting American chatter, unencrypted fragments, the kind that only slip out when a system is surprised. The Americans are discussing a mystery object, a shock, something they struck. Some speculate whale, some speculate debris. No one sounds certain. No one sounds like they're observing a Soviet submarine and smiling. That uncertainty is almost worse than certainty. Because if the Americans don't know, then every movement out here can be misread. A flare could be interpreted as a signal. A periscope mast could be seen as a weapon. A simple course correction could be perceived as aggression, and if they do know, Evsenko lowers the binoculars and forces his breathing to slow. In training, they teach procedures for contact. They don't teach procedures for being a secret in open air. Off to starboard, searchlights begin sweeping. At first they're distant, broad beams scanning water like fingers. Then they sharpen, and one catches the submarine's sail. The light hits with physical violence. Men on the bridge flinch, shielding their eyes. In that beam, the black hole is no longer myth. It's evidence. An American escort ship maintains distance, keeping a cautious gap, as if the water between them is a minefield of misunderstandings. A signal lamp blinks across the darkness, a question dressed as protocol. Do you require assistance? For a fraction of a second, the answer is simple. Yes. Tow us. Help us. End this. Then the real answer arrives with the weight of politics. Accepting American help isn't just rescue. It's a photograph. It's a headline. It's a victory the other side didn't even need to plan. A Soviet nuclear attack submarine, exposed and helpless, being guided like broken machinery by the Navy it was stalking. Evsenko's jaw tightens. He signals back, calm, stiff, controlled. Mechanical difficulties. Soviet assistance en route. It's a statement designed for two audiences, the Americans and the men under his command who need to believe they still belong to a system that can reach them. Below decks, the crew feels the ocean differently. Every roll pushes cold into their bones. Ventilation struggles against the new reality. They're surfaced, visible, and not moving under their own power. A submarine is built to remain unseen. Its corridors are narrow because it's never supposed to host the sky. Now, the sky is the threat. Hours drag by in a limbo that has its own sound. Metal creaks, water slaps, distant rotors. An American helicopter passes low, rotors chopping the night into segments. Its searchlight skates across the hull, across twisted structures where the collision scraped and punched. Downwash stings eyes and throws salty mist into mouths. The scene is surreal from both perspectives. Americans staring down at a Soviet boat like a rare animal surfaced by accident. Soviets staring up at a machine that can hover above them like judgment. Inside the control room, the mood is no longer fear. Fear burns hot and fast. This is something colder. The beginning of accounting. Evsenko moves to the sonar station like a man approaching a witness. The operators still wear their headsets, as if refusing to accept that the story has changed mediums. He requests playback. He wants the minutes before impact. He wants the truth that should have existed. The senior sonar officer's face is tense, eyes ringed with fatigue and confusion. He gestures at the display, at the log timestamps, at the narrow green lines representing a world translated into electricity. There is nothing where something impossible should be. Not a gradual rise, not a thick band, not even a warning smear, just sea noise. That absence isn't a technical glitch you can fix with a wrench. It's a philosophical problem. It means one of two things. Either the equipment failed at the exact worst moment, or the ocean made a liar out of the rules. Evsenko doesn't say it aloud. He doesn't need to. Everyone in that room is thinking the same thought, and each man is trying to avoid becoming the first to admit it. Above them, on the USS Kitty Hawk, the same collision is being read through different language. Damage reports, tank diagrams, fuel levels, and the bitter taste of uncertainty. On a carrier, a sudden impact isn't just a shock. It's a threat to aviation fuel, to weapons storage, to the fragile choreography that keeps thousands of people and hundreds of aircraft from descending into chaos. Damage control teams move with practiced urgency. Compartments get checked. Flooding boundaries get verified. Fuel lines get tested. The carrier is built to take punishment, but it's not built to pretend the punishment didn't happen. A report lands in the captain's hands. There's a hole near the bow and a jet fuel tank area, serious but controllable. The ship is bleeding in the way big ships bleed, not dramatic, but dangerous if ignored. Then someone brings the strange part. Embedded in the carrier's damaged steel is a piece of metal that doesn't belong to any American ship. Bronze, twisted, heavy, not debris, not whalebone, not a stray part from the Kitty Hawk's own machinery. A fragment of a propeller blade, and alongside it, caught and scraped and torn, are patches of black rubber-like material, anechoic tiles, the kind submarines use to absorb and confuse sonar. At that moment, the narrative on the carrier shifts. The mystery object becomes a category they've trained to fear, a Soviet submarine, not detected in time, not driven away, not even clearly heard. They ran over it. The implications stack up quickly. A collision with a submarine is often fatal for the submarine. If the Soviet boat's pressure hull has been compromised, men could be trapped. If the reactor has been damaged, the incident becomes radiological, political, and global. In the middle of an exercise, in contested waters, with both sides' nerves already stretched thin, they launch helicopters for visual confirmation. They call escorts into position, not with guns blazing, but with the careful posture of men holding weapons because they cannot afford to look unprepared. In the Cold War, uncertainty is a kind of fuel. It burns fast. When the carrier group confirms the submarine is surfaced and afloat, crippled, refusing assistance, the carrier doesn't transform into a rescuer. It becomes an observer, because even mercy is strategic. From a cautious distance, the Americans watch the Soviet crew. They watch the signals. They photograph the damage. They record silhouettes. They note behavior. They do what intelligence services do best when presented with an accident. They turn it into information. And back on K314, as hours stretch toward dawn, Evchenko begins building his own private reconstruction. He sits with charts and profiles, tracing layers like a man tracing fault lines after an earthquake. Temperature gradients, salinity, currents. Anything that can explain how an aircraft carrier, loud by nature, vast by design, could become acoustically absent. In the abstract, oceanography is clean. Lines on a page, arrows in a textbook. In the real world, it's betrayal by physics. A sharp thermal layer can bend sound. It can reflect it. It can create shadow zones, pockets of water where noise doesn't arrive as expected. If the carrier's sound energy was refracted upward or sideways, then directly beneath it there could be a cone of relative quiet. Not silence, not invisibility. Just enough reduction and distortion for a sonar system, built to classify and filter, to hesitate. Hesitation is all the ocean needed, because classification systems don't simply hear, they decide, they discard, they label. They compress reality into categories so humans can survive the workload. If something enormous arrives in the wrong frequency band, if it presents as low, rhythmic, biologic-like noise instead of the sharp, mechanical signature expected, then a machine, and even a tired human, can misfile the truth. And misfiled truth is how you get run over. Dawn finally brings shapes on the horizon. Soviet ships, relief made of steel, a cruiser, a tug, the Pacific Fleet reaching out like an arm that arrives late but arrives hard. Lines get thrown. Hawsers tighten. The submarine, once hunter, now cargo, begins the slow, humiliating transit home. The Americans keep their distance and keep their cameras. The Soviets keep their faces and keep their silence. And somewhere in the chain of reports that will climb from ship to fleet to capital, a different kind of discovery is already taking shape. The bronze fragment lodged in an American hull isn't just evidence of collision. It's a gift. In naval warfare, a submarine's propeller, its geometry, pitch, blade count, and manufacturing quirks, isn't a mundane component. It's identity. It's the fingerprint that sonar networks learn to recognize. It's the difference between unknown contact and That class, at that speed, on that bearing. If you have the metal in your hands, you can measure it, model it, simulate it. Teach systems to hunt it. A single accident can unmask an entire family of boats. In Subic Bay, daylight transforms the USS Kitty Hawk into something she was never meant to be, a patient. The dry dock drains away, and the carrier's underside emerges, scarred steel, scraped paint, a long wound that looks less like combat and more like blunt force reality. Men in hard hats and Navy coveralls move along the hull with clipboards and flashlights, but the way they slow down near the damage gives them away. This isn't just repair work, it's evidence handling. Embedded in the torn plating is the piece that changes the story's weight. Bronze, twisted, heavy in the hand. A fragment of a Soviet propeller blade. Not a photograph, not a sonar trace, not a guess. A physical key. Because in undersea warfare, a submarine's propeller isn't hardware, it's identity. The precise curve, the blade geometry, the casting quirks. This is what turns speed into sound, and sound into recognition. With that bronze on a workbench, engineers don't need to imagine what K3 Wawerteen might sound like. They can measure it, model it, teach systems to listen for it, the way a lock learns a single cut of a key. A collision becomes an intelligence windfall. Back across the ocean, K314 arrives home as something worse than defeated, exposed. The tug line is a leash. The harbor feels smaller than it should. Evsinko steps onto the pier and realizes the temperature here is colder than the sea ever was. Not because of weather, but because of the reception. In the Soviet system, success could be ambiguous. Failure could not. He will be asked why he surfaced, why he lost contact, why the boat was where it was, why the most basic rule, do not put your hull under another hull, was broken. In a world obsessed with control, the ocean tricked us. Sounds like a confession of incompetence. Yet the uncomfortable truth is that both captains were following logic. The Americans had reason to go quiet, to drift, to listen, to turn the sea into a trap for anything stalking them. The Soviets had reason to come up for air, to find a vanished target, to trade stealth for certainty for just a minute. Two professional systems, both making rational moves in darkness. And the darkness did what it always does. It hid the consequences until they were touching. There is another layer, one the official language avoids. A question that circles the incident like a shark that doesn't need to rush. What was K314 carrying? In that era, analysts have long argued that Soviet attack submarines could deploy with special weapons, nuclear-tipped torpedoes, or similar ordnance, depending on posture and mission. Not every account agrees. Not every archive is open. But the logic is grimly simple. If a weapon designed for the unthinkable was aboard, then the impact point matters. Meters matter. Luck becomes a strategic variable. And that is the real horror of the night, not the collision itself. The collision didn't start a war. It revealed how easily one could start by accident. Because the Cold War was never only about missiles and speeches. It was about sensors, assumptions, and the fragile belief that professionals could always prevent catastrophe. March 21st, 1984 put a crack in that belief. It showed that silence isn't a shield if the sea can bend your truth. It showed that the biggest ship in the world can become acoustically ambiguous in the wrong water at the wrong moment. It showed that a submarine's greatest weapon, its invisibility, can fail without warning. A few years later, people would point to other hidden mechanisms of the era. Code compromises, intelligence leaks, the quiet theft of secrets that made fleets feel naked. Whether or not any single spy ring guided this particular encounter, the principle still stands. The most dangerous advantage is the one you don't know you've lost. In the end, the Sea of Japan doesn't take sides. It doesn't care who was hunting whom. It simply keeps its layers, its currents, its shadow zones, waiting for doctrine to collide with physics again. And somewhere in a lab, a bronze shard sits under clean light, tagged and cataloged, not as a trophy of victory, as a reminder that in the silent war beneath the waves, the enemy is often closer than you can hear until you hit him.